My name is Nathaniel Brooks. I am 44 years old, and in 2019 I was working as a marine mechanic in a small harbor town near Camden, Maine. I had been living on the mid-coast for nearly 12 years at that point. My job was steady and predictable. I handled engine diagnostics, proper placements, electrical repairs, and the kind of maintenance work that keeps commercial fishing boats running through long seasons. The marina itself wasn't large. It had 8 primary slips, a short fuel dock, and a gravel parking lot that overlooked Penobscot Bay. Most of the boat owners knew each other. Something new showed up in the harbor, people noticed. That summer had been uneventful. Lobster season was moving along normally. Weather patterns were typical for Maine: cool mornings, fog rolling in before sunrise, wind picking up around mid-afternoon. I kept a routine. I arrived at 6 a.m., unlocked the tool shed, brewed a pot of coffee in the office, and walked the docks before starting any repairs. It helped me keep track of small issues before they became expensive ones. The first time I saw the boat, it was tied up at slip 4, which had been empty for over a month. It was a 23-foot white center console with narrow navy striping along the hull. No visible name on the sides. The paint looked older but recently washed. From a distance, it appeared ordinary. There are dozens of boats like that along the Maine coast. What caught my attention was how loosely it was tied. The stern line had too much slack, allowing the boat to drift several feet from the dock as the tide shifted. Most experienced boaters in that harbor tied secure knots and adjusted for tidal change. This one rocked more than it should have. I assumed someone had rented the slip late the night before. That wasn't unusual during summer. I checked the marina ledger later that morning. Slip 4 was not assigned. I asked the dock manager, a man named Curtis who had been running the place for years, whether we had a new arrival. He shook his head. He said no one had signed paperwork, and he hadn't seen anyone come in after closing. We both figured someone might show up later in the day to sort it out. No one did. The next morning, the boat was still there. It looked untouched. No fishing gear on deck. No coolers. No lines coiled near the helm. The console compartment was closed. The outboard motor, a single Yamaha 150, was tilted slightly upward as if recently shut off. I stepped onto the dock and looked more closely. The registration numbers were partially visible on the bow, but the last 2 digits appeared scraped or worn away. That struck me as odd but not immediately alarming. Boats get repainted. Numbers fade. By the third evening, I was locking up around 8:30 p.m. when I heard an engine start. The sound came from slip 4. I walked toward the dock and saw the center console idling in place. The motor was running smoothly. I expected to see someone at the wheel adjusting lines. Instead, the boat eased backward, cleared the slip, and rotated slowly toward the harbor entrance. From where I stood, I had a clear view of the deck. I did not see anyone on board. The movement was controlled. The throttle advanced slightly. The boat glided past the fuel dock and into the open channel. It did not turn on navigation lights, which is required after sunset. That detail stood out to me. The sky was dim but not fully dark yet. I told myself the angle could be hiding the operator. Maybe someone was seated low behind the console. The boat continued out toward the bay until I lost sight of it. The next morning at 6 a.m., it was back in slip 4. Tied loosely again. The lines were secured but not carefully. The hull was dry. No visible signs of heavy spray or debris from a long run offshore. This pattern repeated for several nights. The engine would start sometime between 8:20 and 9 p.m. The boat would leave the harbor quietly and return before sunrise. Each morning it sat in the same position, gently drifting against slack lines. No one was ever present during the day. After the 5th night, I decided to stay later than usual. I parked my truck near the edge of the lot where I could see the entire dock clearly. At 8:47 p.m., the engine started again. I walked down immediately and positioned myself at the end of the pier, no more than 30 feet from the stern. The motor idled steadily. The wheel turned slightly to port. The stern line slipped free. The bow line followed. I was close enough to confirm there was no one standing at the helm. No silhouette. No crouched figure. No movement behind the console. The throttle advanced gently as if someone had pushed it forward with measured pressure. The boat reversed out of the slip without touching the dock. It pivoted with precision and moved down the narrow channel between moored vessels without drifting off course. I remember focusing on the deck, trying to catch any detail I might have missed. The interior was clean. Empty. The boat exited the harbor. I stood there for several minutes after it disappeared into the darkness. I did not call the Coast Guard. I did not contact local authorities. At the time, I didn't have an explanation, but I also didn't have proof of wrongdoing. Boats move. People operate them. It was possible I was simply not seeing the driver. The following week I noticed something new. A thin black cable hung loosely from beneath the console, trailing toward the stern. It hadn't been there before. It looked like marine wiring, possibly connected to some kind of remote steering system, though I had never seen one installed on a small recreational vessel like that. The cable appeared cut near the end. That same evening, I watched from a distance as the boat traveled farther out than usual. A faint light appeared offshore, low to the water's surface. The center console approached it and remained nearby for roughly 20 minutes. I could not hear voices from that distance. Eventually, the offshore light disappeared. The boat returned alone. 2 days later, slip 4 was empty. No note. No damage. Just vacant water. Curtis and I checked with nearby marinas over the next week. No one reported a similar vessel docking overnight. The partially visible registration numbers yielded no matches in the state database. About a month later, a stripped hull washed ashore several miles south along the coast. The motor was missing. The identification numbers were removed entirely. Authorities treated it as abandoned property, likely stolen and dismantled offshore. I drove down to see it from a distance. The navy striping along the hull looked familiar, but without clear markings there was no confirmation. I still work at the same marina. Slip 4 has had different occupants since then. Most of them tie their boats properly. Most of them come and go during daylight hours as expected. Occasionally, when I'm finishing late repairs and the harbor is quiet, I hear an engine idling somewhere beyond the breakwater. It doesn't rev. It doesn't move closer. It just runs steadily in the dark as if waiting. I usually lock up and head home when that happens. I've learned not to watch too long.